Mortgage Coach members, I brought Kristin in the first time, I don't know, was it 2 or 3 months ago, Kristin?
Yeah, I think it was February.
Yeah, it was February. And I had invited her after seeing her at the IMBA in San Diego. She did a session which I thought she had a really unique way of making the case why the industry should be putting priority around millennials. You know, I loved that quote. I use it all the time around if you were providing value and training to someone in a from another country in a different language, you would communicate to them in their native language, and everybody speaks digital, so why aren't we speaking digital? So I mean, I love that whole message, even though I butchered your quote there, Kristin. I'll let you add some value. But last time we really focused the call on millennials. Today it's really Kristin's true passion and her why, which is to better serve, you know, multinational people in the mortgage industry. So she does a lot of consulting with large industries to help them, one, understand the opportunity within the markets they serve, and two, just do a better job internally once they identify those opportunities and they go after it to actually execute. So Kristin, why don't you make the case for multinational lending and help everybody on this call understand the what and why they should put more thought into this.
Great. Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here to talk about this. Like Dave said, I'm really passionate about cross-cultural marketing and sales. I think it's all about improving your customer service, and something that I love about Mortgage Coach is just the way that you approach serving your customers in a way that I think in your mission statement, something about in a way they understand. And I think that a lot of times we don't realize that we're communicating our message in a way that people are not quite understanding. There's a cultural barrier that occurs that prevents us from getting our message across to the consumer. So naturally, we market and sell to people like we would want to be marketed and sold to. So we're basically trying to sell what we would think was valuable. But the problem is that the message gets misinterpreted and confused across different cultures. So for example, in the last call when we were talking about millennials, we talked about how many people are marketing the American dream or their version of the American dream as having a big house with a big yard, white picket fence, and a big family, you know, kind of having that picture that's a status symbol for a lot of people and kind of achieving the American dream. But to me and most millennial home buyers, that really turns us away. And so not that we don't want a family and all of that, but it just doesn't appeal to our culture where we want to be empowered and through investment and communicated in a different way. So in this session, I'm going to be talking about how to cross cultural barriers when it comes to your multinational consumers. So to start, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of your customers or potential customers are actually immigrants. Over the last decade, 39% of the growth in homeownership came from the immigrant population. And that study came from a New American study sponsored by the NBA. And it's a really fast-growing market segment and comes with a lot of different cultural barriers. But in addition, demographics across the board have just been changing dramatically. We see a shift in increase in the Hispanic home buyer, half of which are immigrants, and Hispanics comprise 56% of the new home purchases over the last 3 years. So that's significant. The Asian population is growing very quickly, fastest growing ethnic segment in America, makes up a good portion of home sales in a lot of key areas in the United States. And then millennials, of course, are the largest and most diverse generation in U.S. history. So as a majority, in terms of talking about marketing and sales, we really have to start addressing culture because the new majority is multicultural. So when we are looking at customer service and how to communicate your message, one, like Dave said, digital is a universal language. So I'll talk about that and how to integrate that into your multicultural message. But secondly, really understanding your customer and how to cross over some of those barriers. So one of the problems is that we have a perception in the industry, whether it's true or not, that the mortgage bankers look a little bit like this. They kind of are, the message is not being communicated because we have a culture that shows the white man is the mortgage banker or broker, and the consumer just doesn't connect there. So we have to start changing the way that we are branded as an industry to be able to, and then as well as through customer service and your relationship with your consumer. So multicultural marketing is about communicating your message across those cultural boundaries. Rob talked about the millennial stuff like culture in his newsletter quite a bit, and kind of bringing in the differences in communication and how we receive technology and communicate your message. But in this session, I'm going to be focusing more on the multinational. But feel free, when you're asking questions, we can bring in a little bit of the millennial culture as well. So I'm going to start by talking about market segmentation. And what I mean by that is basically segmenting your customers to better understand them and understand their culture. What can get tricky about this is it can look a little bit like stereotyping. So you have, we're going to divide them into looking at their, in this case, ethnicity, but you can also look at geographic location and behavioral characteristics, psychographics, and even looking at age. So that's where we look at millennials versus older populations. And but in this case, it's really helpful to kind of classify each culture into an individual person, and that's a process that helps you to better kind of communicate your message to that person or that large group. Some other considerations to keep in mind are that if you are communicating your message to Hispanics, there's going to be so much diversity within the Hispanic population. So you really need to have a lot of different segments in mind and better understand the diversity within each segment. So not just kind of grouping everyone into one large group, but you can gain some overall basic understanding, which I'm going to talk about today. But Hispanics in southern New Mexico are going to look different than the Hispanic population in Wisconsin. And if you're looking at an older Hispanic that immigrated from Guatemala, they're going to have a very different culture than a second generation Latino that is a millennial. So each of those segments can have so much diversity within there. It's just important to consider some of those areas as well whenever you begin the segmentation process. So first of all, to look at most cultures across the world have a collectivistic perception of the world. And what I mean by that is that in America, we very much value individualism, meaning we value rising to the top, climbing that ladder of success, kind of time is money. All those things are very core to what it means to be American and for a lot of us. And we don't even realize we do this. It's just very natural. And the best way I can say it is that in an individualistic culture, we say, I help myself, therefore I help the group. So I help myself first, and then I am helping the larger group. But in a collectivistic culture, it's I help the group, therefore I help myself. So in most of the cultures, and definitely in the ones I'll be talking about today, it's a very group mindset. They are very family-oriented, and we have to approach it from that perspective, not just the individual consumer that is actually filling out that application. So again, segment, don't stereotype. Market segmentation is an intentional process that helps group people by, like we said, culture, ethnicity, help you better understand your consumer and craft a universal message. But stereotyping is something that happens accidentally over time that often results in negative assumptions. So it's a really fine line, but it's important to clarify. So if you are, for example, when you type in Oklahoma woman, and I currently live in Oklahoma, these are the first two images that come up. And if you're going to market to me, this would be a stereotype that we are all we just got Wi-Fi last year or something, and that we are overweight. And I think that a lot of times we tend to just group everyone into one group and say everyone's like this. But like I said, research is really critical when you start the market segmentation process. So I'm going to go over, there's 4 questions I think are really critical before you market or begin any kind of strategy to any strategic market segment. And the first question is, what do they want? You want to know what they want in the home buying process, what they want in customer service, what they want in the home that they're purchasing. And that's going to be varying across different cultures. And then secondly, why do they buy? Do they buy primarily because it is a financial investment, or are they buying primarily because it's a piece of the American dream? You really want to know what is motivating them. And then third, how do they communicate? So what is, are they communicating over mobile, or do they prefer in-person communication? What language is their preferred language? All of those will be critical to developing not only a customer service strategy, but also marketing. And then lastly, what barriers exist? And this is really helpful whenever you are developing kind of understanding your customer, especially from an underwriting perspective as well, kind of understanding the cultural nuances there that might not be understood in that process, but also when you are developing certain content to give your clients. So with millennials, we talked about how student loans can be a barrier for a lot of people. So having content ready that you're either publishing out to sending to your clients or sending to your customers that are related to that can really help you develop that relationship and, of course, cross some of those barriers with them as well and have a plan to do that. So now I'm going to go over a few examples of market segmentation, and this is, of course, going to be very broad, very, these are just a few examples, but like I said, I recommend really going in more depth here. Oh, okay. So first, I want you to meet Prasad. Prasad is an immigrant. 75% of Asian Americans are immigrants, and I believe in the Indian culture it's about 90%. So he is from India originally. He has a higher income. He's a doctor. On average, Asian Americans have 30% higher income. He speaks fluent English. English is one of the languages in India, and his mindset is much more analytical in his process in conversation. He also has a young family, and grandparents, or his parents, are also in the home. So in the Asian culture, there's 1 in 3 families live in multi-generational homes, and that's compared with 1 in 6 of the general population. They're much more likely to have that kind of, again, family-oriented mindset and be looking for a bigger home as well. Okay, so now asking that first question we went over, what does he want? What are his preferences? He wants to have the capacity for his family. He wants to be typically in a good school district, have an updated home. The most important thing for you guys to remember is that he wants efficiency in service. And really, he's going after the best rate. This is most likely going to be a rate shopper. So they're more inclined to look over for efficient service and communication as well as the best rate. And so you want to be able to communicate how you're getting that rate and really make sure you provide a lot of education in that area. And then what is he motivated by? He is mainly a practical motivation, really motivated by the investment side. And of course, everyone is achieving something, and it is always going to be an emotional connection to the home. But in this culture, it's much more likely that they are going to be connected to the investment, and that the financial benefits of homeownership are going to be the key driver to purchasing that home. And a lot of this information can be found in Freddie Mac released a fantastic study that divides the Asian culture into, I believe there were 6 cultures that they looked at. So I'm happy to send that if you want to reach out to me as well. But another reason that he would buy is that he would have saved enough for a significant down payment on the home, because Asian Americans typically have waited quite a bit to make sure that they don't have to pay mortgage insurance and are generally used to putting a significant amount of cash down on the house. And then third, how does he communicate? This is predominantly in English and over the mobile device or extremely tech savvy. So that's definitely going to be someone that you want to be communicating through digital. Then lastly, what are the barriers? Barriers to you are that he's a rate shopper, so you want to be prepared for that. And then just knowledge about the process, because a lot of people are not going to understand the mortgage process in America and what that looks like, haven't grown up in this. His parents didn't buy a house in America. So understanding, providing that kind of education in a way that's convenient and efficient is going to be really helpful. Overall, you want to be able to address his desire for investment and the financial benefits of homeownership without contradicting his value for traditional values. A lot of times we think then we're kind of dismissing the bigger picture, but with Indian Americans, you want to make sure you're covering, really appealing to his value for home and family at the same time as addressing that primary motivation for investment. So now we're going to look at Juan, who is an older immigrant from Mexico, and he is living in New Mexico. He is very family-oriented, relationship-oriented, much more likely to be averse to debt, so he's going to be someone with a thinner credit file. Of course, he speaks Spanish, so going over broadly, this is what your client's going to look like. And then he's going to very much value having a relationship with the lender and really understanding the overall value of, or you need to show that you value his culture in the process. So really showing him that, that you're someone that can be trusted and that he can have a friendship with you. And then he's motivated by definitely achieving the American dream, owning a piece of the rock. And I had a godmother who was an immigrant from Mexico, and she always called it owning a piece of the rock. And it was such an emotional thing for me to watch her buy her home. Was amazing. I mean, you really want to be celebrating with this customer, and you end up with a very close relationship with a lot of them if you're serving them in this way. So, of course, communicating, especially for older populations, Spanish is going to be their predominant first language, but over 90% of applicants speak fluent English, so that doesn't necessarily need to be a barrier, but it's helpful to know that, because if you're going through one of the biggest or the biggest financial decision of your life, you probably want to have some kind of information or education in your first language. And secondly, it's usually not just one person that's buying the house. It's kind of a family ordeal. So you want to be able to make sure that all members of his family can understand the process and really be able to participate in that decision-making process. So, and then this person's also more likely to feel comfortable in person. You're going to get a lot better answers from them and getting a lot more information from them if you're in person, and of course that helps you establish that relationship a lot better. And then there's a strong value for personalism, which means just having a more of a personal connection with them. So even having like, I've noticed when I worked with Latino immigrants in the area, it was if I had food or a drink, something available that helped us just have a moment before getting down to business where we could chat and just be friends a little bit. Then I ended up with way more accurate answers and more information. It was a lot better experience, and of course they trusted me much more. So taking a little bit of time to communicate at the beginning is really helpful. And then barriers, like we talked about before, the thin credit file is really typical with this population. And then also they tend to receive family contributions, so it's not just the one person buying the house, and that can complicate underwriting a little bit. So overall, you want to make sure that you are building the trust and relationship with this consumer and being aware of some of the cultural nuances that exist in that relationship. Now I'm going to talk about Veronica, and she is a Hispanic millennial who is, again, a very drastically different culture than a traditional Latino immigrant. She is bicultural and bilingual, meaning she is fully Latino and fully American millennial culture. So she's carrying those two things. I have a friend who told me this one time that I thought was perfect, and she said, it just described this market segment. She said, soy 100% Latina, and I'm 100% American. So I'm 100% Latina. You kind of are carrying both of those cultures. She's a great target market because she's got lower than average student loan debt and extremely tech savvy, so very much your digital consumer. She also prefers the relationship with the lender as well as efficiency and information, which we talked about with the millennial home buyer. So carrying both of those cultures and preferences. She's motivated both by the American dream and that emotional connection to home, probably usually a little bit more so than the financial benefits, but that's still a big piece of it, being empowered by the investment and understanding how she's investing in her career and her financial success. And then communication, and it's always important to look at how does she communicate with her friends, because that's going to allow you to provide her with the best experience. And that's typically in English and usually over text and mobile device, instant messenger, very active on social media, like all of us, but Hispanic millennials are actually more active on social media than non-Hispanic. So it's definitely a great place to communicate with them. And then barriers are typically, again, the family contributions are still there. The credit file, because culturally she's not growing up learning that, or to get a credit card. I had a credit card at like 16 years old, but I could build my credit. And that is not going to be the case for this buyer. So you might have to have a little bit more of a long-term game or explain to them how to build their credit in order to qualify within a few months. So overall, you want to consider an approach that incorporates both the millennial preferences and values as well as Hispanic. And then lastly, I'm going to cover the Native American culture through my friend Kimmy, and this is not a picture of her, but she has this really interesting cultural segment that a lot of people I think are missing. But they have a polytheistic worldview, which means they're much more connected to nature. They view through religious and worldview believe in kind of this overall connection, and have very strong extended families. And then also are bicultural. So they do have very strong influences of traditional American culture, if you can say traditional. But there's still especially when it comes to communication, this consumer, it's really important to understand some of those differences. So some of her preferences are going to definitely be building trust and respect in the service process. That's going to be absolutely huge with this consumer. And then for the home, it's a little bit less about owning property as it's more about having the communal space for a family and having that connection. So you're not so much owning a piece of the rock in this case. And the motivation is more along the lines of having stability and security in the home, and again, that kind of communal space. And then communication, it's much more, you need to be slower to speak and a little bit less direct. So typically Native Americans do not respond well to drilling down with questions. You want to really establish trust first, and they tend to want to process things before providing an answer, and get family input as well. So barriers are definitely trust and credit restrictions as well. And then, again, like I said, the most important thing is just to be really careful in communication and not rushing that process at all. And I'm going to cover some of the best practices. That, again, was just an example of segmenting, but it provides you a little bit of a taste and why I think it's so critical for you to be able to understand your consumer and really make a strategy that's based on that research. And now there are some areas that are overall great practices in marketing and sales when it comes to multinational consumers, and it also stems over into multicultural. So this can be helpful just across your market segment. Something we talked about last time on the last call was this article that said, "Marketing is dead and loyalty killed it." And that was done by Harvard Business Review. And I thought that was so perfect, and it is exactly what you've got to be focused on when it comes to multinational marketing and sales as well as millennials. I mean, you're not going to get this market by doing flashy marketing or selling them the way that I think a lot of people have been used to selling. We've got to be focused on loyalty and developing a strong relationship, which requires us understanding each other's culture. So a reason why I absolutely love Mortgage Coach, one reason, is that we're helping us communicate a message that looks very dry and is extremely overwhelming for a lot of people, especially for first home buyers, into an advice-oriented experience. And especially with multinational buyers, this is so critical to be able to be part of it and feel connected to the process, because if any of you have traveled to another country, you know how incredibly stressful it is to communicate in another language or to try to cross over some of those cultural boundaries. I speak fluent Spanish, but when I traveled to Spain, it was a mess sometimes. I cried almost every day. I also had a great time, but it was very, very stressful, and I ended up in a hospital. So when you're making some of those major decisions or having one of the biggest financial decisions of your life, you want to be able to participate in a language that's native, which for all of these cultures is going to be digital. And what makes you stand out above the others? I mean, now it's such a standardized process. Like, why would I go to you over someone else? And I think the experience and customer service has to be your primary sales point. I know for mortgage coach professionals, that's your key thing. So you're really right on track with that, and just adding in some of these cultural elements can really help you as this consumer. So first is to really make sure everyone is trained in cultural competence. That really helps you not only with providing great service, but it's in compliance with a lot of the new diversity regulations in the Dodd-Frank. And secondly, communicate with your community leaders and organizations that support these minority populations. That can really help you not only understand your consumer better, but also to develop relationships and trust within the community. I think this is actually one of the best keys to success in marketing specifically. And then leverage your compliance. So Section 342 is internal diversity, but when you look at especially TRID coming out and the educational process that entails, you really want to leverage that and provide the whole experience. So looking at providing education, that's why, looking at the total cost analysis is a perfect example of being able to communicate this message across the culture and in a way that's really effective. And then fourth, consider your client values and cultural nuances in every area of the process. Particularly, we're talking about customer service, but really understanding that the communication is different and having some of those elements that make them feel a little bit more comfortable, like a cup of coffee or whatever it is that kind of helps you develop that relationship first before getting down to business, is really helpful with overall sales. And building that trust and relationship through the consumer mortgage coach experience can help you have a longer-term relationship. And another part of this, going back to just the overall culture, client values, is that if you provide them an experience like this, you're able to carry it over to their family relationships as well. So you might not have the whole family in the office, but you know that there's going to be a lot of other people helping this one person make the decision. So if you provide them something that they can take home or send them something, a video or the experience, you're going to be able to connect a lot greater with their values as well as all of the people involved in the decision and in the process. So lastly, of course, the communication preferences. Mobile is key for all of these consumers. A lot of them, especially immigrants, do not have laptops or computers, but they do have mobile devices. Most of your applicants will have computers, but their preference is going to be mobile. They over-index in that in almost every culture of the immigrant population. And then, of course, consider language. Digital is key, like we've been talking about, but also their first language, really providing that kind of information in a way that is communicated so that they feel comfortable. It's not just about if they understand, but if they feel at ease with the process. And then, of course, video can help you connect on a relational level, which provides an opportunity to use an interpreter if you'd like to provide that for the client's family, as well as providing it in culture, which means that you're establishing a relationship with that consumer. So I think I'm going to skip up. I realize we're kind of out of time, but overall I want to make sure that everyone understands that, of course, the new majority is multicultural. The digital and mobile is a universal language, so you're able to connect with your customers in that way. And then having a digital strategy that is culturally competent is really just like when we learned how to text message, and yes, I do remember that, but it was a skill. We had to learn the skill, and it's the same thing with cultural competence. We just need to understand how to appropriately communicate, cross those boundaries, and then you'll have loyal customers, and most of these, your immigrant buyers, will be incredible brand advocates for you. They will refer you all over the place. And just developing those skills is really, really key to the future, as well as increasing your referrals with your current buyers. But then be consistent and authentic with your strategy. A lot of people I see, they go out to a community event and say, well, I tried it once, I didn't get any buyers. That's not how you have to approach this. You have to approach it from a long-term standpoint and really commit to getting to know the community, getting involved, and give it 6 to 10 months before you decide whether or not this is effective. But really developing relationship is going to be key to an authentic strategy. And then, of course, don't wait on this. That's it. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like me to send you any of my research.
Right on, Kristin. So you were fantastic. I put Kristin's email in the chat, so please reach out to her. She's just a fantastic resource here at Mortgage Coach to not only bring this message and make the case for, you know, how to be successful, why you should be successful in this market, but I loved how she makes the case that millennials speak digital. It's just another extension of that. So as a reminder to everybody, you know, many of you are loan officers, some of you are branch managers, regionals. I think it's important to really start expanding our thought around digital. It's not a strategy. We need to transform our company into being a digital company. And I think as loan officers, that goes for you. You need to stop thinking of your mobile device as, you know, it's for email and text. No, this is a communication tool for you to emotionally connect with people. So really looking forward to having the new app hit. Really looking forward to seeing how you guys can create videos. Literally just go from meeting a client, having a mortgage coach report, and then recording that video. So make sure you sign up for our university. There's just no reason, no excuse now. Every day for the first 3 weeks. If you want basic training, it's 8 o'clock every morning. If you want 102 training, it's 2 p.m. I have also put the link in chat for those. And in addition to that, every Tuesday, every Thursday, we're still training, and every Friday we're there for beginners. So as we wrap up today's call, I can't emphasize enough, invite a realtor to next week's call with Steve Harney. This concept, I've been following Google's Zero Moment of Truth, and we'll define what that is. Do a Google search in the meantime if you want to know more before the call. But every time Steve Harney comes into the Mortgage Coach community, he delivers massive value to help you be a leader in your market and help you pick up market share. So, Kristin, thank you so much. Any last thoughts as we wrap it up today, Kristin?
Just to really focus on the customer service experience and the overall digital strategies. So, thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. Again, remember to sign up for Rob Kristin's newsletter, and you all know how to connect with Kristin. It's been a great week. Have an awesome week. We'll see you next week with Steve Harney. Take care, everybody.